What does hockey sound like to you? Perhaps it's the satisfying sound of blades slicing and crunching on ice. Maybe it's timeless play calls from some of the game's biggest games.
Can you believe it? I can.
Or maybe, just maybe, if you're a hockey fan who grew up in the early 2000s, it sounds something like this.
If you're listening, whoa. I don't wanna waste my time, become another casualty of society. And now I know how far you go to be the next freak show American Psycho.
When you take a nostalgia trip into the realm of EA's NHL series, you may not remember exactly what game the breakaway cam or game breakers were added in, but what you likely do remember is what songs were on each of those soundtracks. For example, when I say NHL 2002, you'd likely say,
to be the next freak show American Psycho.
or if I were to ask you about NHL 2003, someone would probably yell,
Whoa!
I think you get the point. The pop-punk powered soundtrack managed to make an indelible mark on the memories of hockey fans worldwide, and in doing so, it helped to shape what hockey sounds like to an entire generation. And the person who helped set this all in motion? Electronic Arts' president of music, Steve Schnur.
It's almost like I'm going down memory lane here. I have to go and listen to Enter Shikari. I remember my original office was next to the CFO of studios, and he used to kindly come in and go, excuse me, can you just turn it down a little bit? And I'm like, no!
You may not know his name, but you most certainly know his work. FIFA, Madden, NBA Live, MVP Baseball, and of course, NHL. Schnur and his team at EA have helped to create and curate some of the most notable and influential soundtracks in the history of the genre. But it did not happen overnight. Back in 1999, the success of the first entry in the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise came with the praise of its soundtrack. The mixture of punk, ska, and hip-hop music made for a track list that perfectly represented the musical mosaic of what skateboarders actually like to listen to. So what did hockey fans actually like to listen to back in the 2000s? EA set out to find that out.
I think sports games sounded like the sport at the time. It tried to sound like what it was like to go to a Devils game or a Rangers game. That's not what I wanted. That's not what we wanted. We wanted them to sound like the future of sport. We wanted it to sound like EA Sports and what NHL will sound like to the next generation. So we ripped that up, man. And I wanted soundtracks that pissed your parents off. I wanted parents to say, turn the game down. That was my dream. I didn't want to put music in the game for the people in the suites. I wanted to put music in the game for the people in the stands, in the fan sections, but more importantly for their kids. It was your music, it was your game.
With the goal of introducing new music to a new generation of fans now the top priority for EA's music team, the size of their in-game soundtracks increased exponentially. Where NHL 2001 only featured 2 licensed songs, NHL 2002's tracklist grew to 7. Then NHL 2003 went on to double that number and seemingly forged the blueprint for what EA would consider the ideal soundtrack length for future titles. As for the artists featured on these soundtracks, 741, Avenged Sevenfold, Treble Charger, just like how a good radio DJ or A&R department has to keep their ear to the ground to discover new talent, EA's music team had to do the very same to find artists whose music would resonate with their audience as well.
I remember a guy named Dave Warfield who was the one of the producers. He and I would just dig in and just play music like we were kids in high school. The process was really like I would go out there and seek out what was coming out. I looked pretty much everywhere around the world. I tried to reach out to my network at the time and find out what's coming out in 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, and how can I license it. Originally it was fantastic because when I eventually went to hand in the license to a Warner or Sony, there would always be the licensing guy and he'd be going, I don't even have this song in my system yet. And I was like, yes, because I wanted to make sure it was that early.
That's why if you've ever asked yourself, how come you're just hearing this band for the very first time anytime you're listening to an NHL soundtrack, that's because most people are hearing that band for the first time.
I was friends with a guy that worked at Capitol Records. His name is Larry Jacobson. He had left to manage an unsigned band in Orange County, California. Called me up and he goes, you gotta help me break this band. And he came to the office, the old EA offices in LA, and played me Avenged Sevenfold demos. I freaked out. So I said, I'm gonna break this band. I'm going to put it in every sports game I have. And they got signed to a publishing deal. They got signed to a record deal. So the process was, frankly, kind of like what I do now. Digging in, searching for bands, what I think, not always my taste, what I think that NHL fan is going to love.
It is important that you like the music that they pick, too, as the songs selected for a soundtrack are absolutely vital to your overall enjoyment of a game. Just think about how much time you spend in the menus of a video game, listening to song after song after song after song.
I mean, it's one of the first things you hear, right? You start booting up the game, you get to the main menu, and the soundtrack is the first thing you hear. It kind of sets the tone.
You need to get pumped up. You need to feel ready. You can't go in there listening to, sorry, but Barry Manilow wouldn't work very well. You know what I mean? You need to feel ready.
We've evolved over the years in the way that we think about the soundtrack. In the early 2000s, we started, it was really about capturing the rock tone, the grittiness of the NHL, the heavy hitting tone that the NHL had at the time. And then, as you look at our soundtracks and how they evolved over the last little bit, you start to see different genres showing up now. You're seeing hip hop, you're seeing electronic, and all of that just is trying to capture our, what our players want, the way that their tastes have changed over the years.
Sorry, Barry Manilow. I actually know him, so I feel bad I just said that. I'm going to get a call now asking to put Copacabana in NHL 21.
Considering just how much we as fans actually remember the songs featured in games, it's easy to see why developers like EA set out to make memorable soundtracks in the first place. Despite whatever your opinion is of their newest titles, the soundtracks have clearly helped to create a bond with their franchises through a sense of nostalgia that just flicks on like a light switch anytime we hear a song from a past title in the series. Boom! NHL 14. Bang! NHL 08. But while it's true that the strength of EA's soundtracks have helped to build some sense of brand loyalty, to label it as nothing more than a marketing tool would be rather cynical. It's undeniably helped to shape an entire generation of hockey fans' taste in music.
Without the NHL soundtracks, I would have never heard Sweetness. Sweetness by Jimmy Eat World.
Live It Up by Airborne.
Punk Rock 101.
Montreal Calling from NHL 07.
Hypes you up so much.
The NHL series soundtrack has introduced a lot of different types of music to me.
Into punk and alternative still now and back then.
Most of my favorite bands were bands I found on NHL 03 and 04.
I hear a song that I like, I listen to more songs by that artist.
And I will always take any opportunity I can get to talk about how good NHL 04 is.
One of the best soundtracks.
My life would be very different.
Just like anyone else who grew up playing sports video games, the tracks from these games made up the soundtrack of my childhood as well. A lot of the bands that I learned about in this game are still some of my favorite bands today, and that's the very thing that Schnur and his team set out to do originally.
You made my day here because, not that we live in a bubble musically, but we live in our own bubble, and to speak to gamers regularly is critically important. It's important to hear the reaction, the importance that song or songs were to somebody. I always kind of joke around, but it's true that, I'd travel all around the world and I'd be in Frankfurt, Germany, or I would be in London or wherever in the world, and you go up and the passport control guy says, "What's your name? What do you do for a living?" I'd say, "I work for EA Sports." "Oh, what do you do?" I said, "I run music there." And he'd be like, "Oh my God, did you do the music for FIFA 12? Oh my God, this band." All of a sudden people go from being completely professional to completely just music geeks. And that's the greatest feeling in the world to me.
So what does hockey sound like to you? I'm not gonna be able to answer that for you, but I think that you'll know as soon as you're done watching this video, because you're most likely gonna go relive and re-listen to your favorite song from your favorite NHL game. You're about to listen to Sweetness, aren't you?